This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Welcome, everyone, to Somewhere in the Skies. As usual, I am your host, Ryan Sprague, and I am so excited today. This is an interview that I have been waiting to do for a very, very long time. We're going to be talking about this revolutionary new project that is headed by one of my favorite people in the quote-unquote UFO community, enemy of UFO Twitter, and just one of the coolest guys I know, working on this brand new UFO tracking device. And we're going to talk all about how it works, how you can get involved with this, and everything else going on with UFOs in 2021. So without further ado, here is the host of the Mad Scientist podcast and on the advisory board, the head of the advisory board for SkyHub, Dr. Chris Cogswell. Chris, how's it going, my man?
Good, man. It's going really well. How are you doing?
I am good. I have mentioned on the last episode I was able to escape New York, and I'm here on the island of Oahu for the umpteenth time. I'm starting to think people probably think I'm like in the witness protection program because I'm escaping to these remote places so often. But no, things are good for me, brother. How about you?
Things are going well. You know, I haven't escaped anywhere as nice as Oahu, but I occasionally make my escape up to New Hampshire, still in the mountains. So that's always nice. But yeah, doing well.
Dude, give me East Coast like fall over anything. Like yeah, I'm not a beach guy. I'm not a swimmer. So like, yeah, it's great. It's Hawaii and I feel very fortunate, but I'm not like one of these people who's like, let's go. I like doing this stuff all the time. So
sure. Totally feel you, man. Yeah. Napping under a tree in the middle of the autumn. It's nice and crisp outside. You can't beat it. And then you wake up full of bugs, which is
full of bugs.
Not great, but whatever. It's fine. We move fast.
Exactly. Your pumpkin spice lattes tipped over and someone stole your wallet. Yep.
That's how it East Coast. Gotta love it.
Love it, brother. Awesome. Well, I know we could talk weather and locations for a while, but that's not why you're here. We're here to talk about SkyHub, which is so amazing. But before we get to what it is, how it works, how you're involved, for any of our new viewers or listeners, I want to kind of catch them up to who you are, what you do, how you got involved with the UFO topic, and what brought you into this crazy community that we've all found ourselves in. And yeah, give us the origin story if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I was bitten by a radioactive scientist at the age of 10. No, so I got involved initially because my family is definitely one who tends to believe in more. My family tends to be one that believes in sort of, non-scientific things at times and things that I think the public would think of as sort of more fringe or out there belief systems. But at the same time, my family was very grounded in the sciences and in history and philosophy. And so, at family kind of gatherings, we were, as likely to sort of talk about, religious philosophy and dogma and whatever as astrology or, ghosts or UFOs or whatever. So my family was very sort of steeped in that view. And I think it's because my family is made up of immigrants. So when I was a kid, I, was always pushed by my family to go into something technical and, do really well in school and learn and everything else. But also there was always sort of an edge of mysticism and sort of fantasy and folklore imbued in everything. And so when I got to sort of high school and then to college and then even in grad school, I've always been really interested in why people who are, intelligent, good people can sometimes fall for people who are trying to take advantage of them, whether it's people who fall into cults or people who give money to a psychic to, talk to the dead relative or something, or even the UFO subject, right? Why does someone pay thousands of dollars to go on a, whatever, an Ancient Aliens cruise or something? And so that's always been really interesting to me. And at the same time, I've always thought that you have this group of people, this large group of people who are making claims, and the scientific community, the sort of wider public, just discounts their stories out of hand, or at least used to discount their stories sort of out of hand. And I always thought that was really unfair, because, the people who have these sightings, it's not just, crackpots or people who are, I don't know, drunks or whatever, and they come home and they're like, I was abducted, right? Like, that's not what happens. It's pilots, it's teachers, it's lawyers, it's mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers, and, people from all walks of life have these experiences. And so for me, another part of it was always the interest in, you have this community who claims that something is happening to them, in many cases something very traumatic and disturbing, and yet, and they have real effects. They have real negative things happen to them. I mean, we've been at conferences together where people come forward and tell their stories, and it's a grown man sobbing in front of a room of 100 people that he's never met. That's more than just, again, we might not be able to say what actually happened to that person, but that's more than just someone making up something for attention. That doesn't fly with me. That doesn't make sense. So when I was in grad school, I started doing a podcast, the Mad Scientist podcast, on sort of this question of the philosophy and history of science, and why do people believe these things, and is there anything to them, and all those sorts of things. And a listener actually reached out and basically said, something like, you're so smart, why don't you get involved then? And I was like, it's kind of a good point, right? Like, I'm making all these claims, and I'm like, I bet I can figure this out in a week. And, it's the stupid stuff you say on the internet. And then after talking it through with other people who I consider to sort of be mentors to me in the science world, in the academic world, in industry, and then in the skeptical world, basically everyone said, if you think that that's a route forward to talk to these people and understand them, and work with people who've had these experiences, then you should do it, because you're coming at it from a good place.
Yeah.
And that's really why I got involved. And that initially led me to kind of talking to people, and I was lucky to end up meeting a lot of people who were very interested in my background and research work and everything else, and my take on this. That led me to doing work with MUFON for a little while, which didn't turn out so well, because MUFON just refuses to learn from their mistakes, and just keeps making bad, worse and worse and worse decisions. But anyways, we could go into that. It's a whole other can of worms.
It's a whole other show, I know.
But suffice it to say that I've tried to be involved in this in a way that lets me retain my own credibility, because I have a day job. I want to continue working in the sciences and in the fields that I work in, but also still able to do sort of outreach and engagement with people who have had these experiences, who believe these things, and try to get to some sense of what is really happening here. And that, I guess, sort of I am a very critical voice in the UFO community generally. And so because of that, I have less friends than than others do in the community. But I think that the people and the groups that I have worked with and we've built have been of a very high caliber. And again, just generally, it's really easy to be on Twitter and say, this is all just people making this up. But again, the thing I always come back to is, if it's all made up, that's much scarier than if it's UFOs. If it's all made up, that means that there is, that means that it would be so easy then for a foreign adversary to start a blog and manipulate the public, and we're seeing some of that with sort of, politics today worldwide with conspiracy theories and anti-vaccination feelings and everything else. But it's a lesson that, it's something that people in the UFO world have sort of been yelling about for decades. Mm-hmm. I'm not the first researcher to say that, hey, if you can understand why a UFO grifter is able to make money off of their desert getaway packages, then you can understand how propaganda spreads in a community. And so that's sort of, I guess, so that's how I got to before SkyHub. So how I got involved with SkyHub was really, SkyHub initially was an idea for something like SkyHub has been sort of floating around the UFO community for a while. And actually products, or not really products, but tools like SkyHub have actually been something that was of interest for the military and, astronomers and NASA and other kind of, governmental groups for a very long time. Actually, since basically the launch of Sputnik, the idea of tracking and understanding what's in the skies above us has been of great interest. Yeah. Public groups that have done this include like CAMS via SETI or other kind of meteor projects, or, even weather stations in some way, or a type of SkyHub, or a type of, sky surveillance recognition platform. But the problem with those previous methods have been that they're all very large and bulky and costly and everything else. And my SkyHub is this big. This is my SkyHub.
That's crazy,
right?
Man.
It connects to a camera. I just plug it in. That's my SkyHub. So, the increases in technology and computing power and the shrinking of electronic hardware has gotten to the point now that what before we had to do with like an entire, like a weather truck, right? You can do with a Raspberry Pi or a Jetson and some software. So that's really what was intriguing to me about the SkyHub project when the team originally approached me was, you've heard about all these other projects. Obviously this has been out there for a long time. We can do it for cheaper, smaller, and we will do it in a way that is completely transparent to the public. And that to me was very, very, that was the thing. That was really the hook that got me involved and made me want to take part in the project.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, let's rewind just a little bit, Chris, if you don't mind, brother. And that's a really good point. I do want to talk to you about the transparency that you guys are doing over at SkyHub. But could you give us kind of, I guess, the origin of SkyHub before you were approached? Who created this? Who's involved? And maybe kind of walk us through what SkyHub is, if you don't mind. I know that's a lot to ask, but maybe give us the origin of how it came to be, why you thought this was something you wanted to put your name on, and maybe a little about the process of what SkyHub is.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are so to start with, SkyHub really started as a effort by a group of developers, so software developers, who wanted to build a unit that could capture evidence of objects in the sky above us using techniques and tools that would be beyond question. So using machine learning and artificial intelligence to automatically capture and categorize objects or images of objects in the sky above us. The initial idea really came from Steve McDaniel, Corey Gaspard, and Adam Allen. And actually, initially, they were on a team with Dr. Bob McGuire. That team didn't work out, and so then Steve, Corey, and Adam kind of continued the software development on their own. And then from there, we sort of built SkyHub. And so I think the next person to join the team was probably Richard Hopf, who is our hardware design and fabrication specialist. And I think it was me, and then David Moore, who's our audio engineering and science communications specialist. We now have other members of the team as well, Paul Wright and Justin Phillips. We have over 200 people in our Discord who currently participate and help us develop and answer questions and things like that. But so the basic idea, though, or the basic concept of SkyHub is we build a system that is easy to assemble, relatively cheap to produce and build, and we provide the software to run it free of charge to the public. The public then puts the thing together. They buy the stuff from other places. They put it together themselves based on instructions we give them. And then they deploy them out in their backyards and on their roofs and wherever. And the software, what it does is as an object comes into frame above the camera, it automatically turns on and starts recording the video. And then on the back end, a system using artificial intelligence tells or sort of picks out from those images what is a bird, what is an airplane, what is an insect, and then ultimately what's left behind would be the unknowns.
That's okay. So that was kind of my next question for you is once the the recording starts and you start getting that data in, how exactly does the machine learning play into differentiating these objects? So is it like, okay, we have 5 different SkyHubs out there monitoring whatever, let's say a Cessna plane that goes by. Does the machine then know, all right, these are the properties of the Cessna according to our sort of observational look at it and keep, is it, okay, now we have all of these are Cessnas, all of these are meteors, all of these are blah, 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 and then the true unknown. How does that all work?
So just to begin with, artificial intelligence and machine learning are buzzwords that are used all over the place to seem way more complicated than they are. You're technically any system where a sensor measures a set point and then tells a computer to change something to get back to the set point is doing artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Right. So a thermometer. So in your house right now, you have a thermometer or a thermostat that measures the temperature in the rooms of your home. And you can set the temperature to be at like 60 degrees, 65 degrees. If you're a weirdo like me, you set it at 60 degrees. And then you wear a
Me
sweater.
too, brother.
Right? Yeah. That's if you're like me, you do that, and then your wife is wearing a blanket.
I know that feeling well.
That's one or the other, right? So, but that system is a very, very simple version of artificial intelligence, because what it's doing is it is taking a measurement and then changing something, making something happen to get to a certain set point or a certain value. So in many ways, like control systems, control schemes, sensors, those sorts of things with like control systems are a very simple version of artificial intelligence. In our case, the artificial intelligence is more complicated, but it's still basically just, we give it a list of, say, 20 to 30 set points that we say, okay, if you measure these things, it's an airplane. If you measure these things, it's a meteor. If you measure these things, it's a bird or an insect or whatever. So that's basically how the artificial intelligence works. The set points are the things that we're actually looking at in terms of what we want the machine to be able to differentiate between are motion. So in other words, an airplane, if you're thinking about the camera itself is looking up at the sky. If you think about an airplane as it travels across the frame of the vision of the camera, the airplane will, maybe it starts coming in here, and then it'll fly at a very set path, and it takes a straight line path usually. Whereas if we think about something like, Elizondo's 5 observables, let's say, one of them is like non-ballistic motion, right? So the object bounces all over the place. We can do things with the video. So the first step is making the camera recognize that an object is coming into frame. Then all we do is we measure how the object moves across the video. So every frame where it moves. From that, we can get things like its speed, its acceleration, its direction. We can tell how straight the path is. So is the path tortuous or not? We can tell all kinds of other things like that. And then we have other sensors too that can tell us, this is an airplane, this is a whatever. All the artificial intelligence is doing is if it sees a certain number of those things that fit within, say, the bucket of airplane, it marks it as an airplane. Does that kind of make sense in that case, Ryan?
Oh yeah, totally. Because
Okay.
I think, again, it's all about differentiating these objects. That's the point of this. Until you get to the true unknown, that's always the bottom and the least likely. But
exactly.
yeah.
Now, the way that the machine learning works is if you can give a computer instructions to say, okay, I want you to measure 1,000 videos of an object. I'm telling you that these objects are airplanes, right? So I have to know that they're airplanes beforehand. I have to tell the computer it's an airplane.
Right.
And then what the computer does is it measures those metrics again that we tell it to measure for: speed, acceleration, tortuosity, displacement vector, or whatever, those other things. We tell the machine to measure those things. And then at the end of it, it essentially says, okay, well, based on the 1,000 measurements I've now taken of an airplane, this is what the airplane profile looks like. So airplanes have a velocity between this value and this value, and most of them are here. And so within 95% confidence, I can say that if you have a velocity of this, you're an airplane. That's a very simple example. We're not going to be able to do it just based off velocity. But so that's the way the machine learning works. It's instead of us giving the computer the set point, right? We let the computer determine what the most likely set point is for a set of data.
That is so cool. Yeah.
So, imagine, Elon Musk. Elon Musk gets, whatever. It's 100 years from now, and Elon Musk has turned us all into robots, and we have microchips in our brains or whatever. Imagine if your thermostat was able to measure how comfortable you were, right? It's
right.
Basically, you would be telling it, okay, well, I want you to measure for things like, is the person perspiring? Are they sweating? Are they breathing heavy? Are they red in the face? Are they whatever? Or measuring your internal temperature maybe, and then changing the thermostat to fit to where your internal temperature hits the right set point. So machine learning is basically just, again, it's just another kind of fancy way of saying, instead of it being a person or like interns for us or whatever, getting all that data ourselves by doing pen and paper math, we let a computer do it. That's all it is. Cool. So over time then, and so in that way, then you basically can, if your system is good enough, ultimately the goal would be that we would be able to find the easiest, cheapest, and by cheap I mean cheap computationally, not necessarily cheap economically, but like the most accurate measurement we can do with the smallest number of sort of cycles of math we have to do to tell this is a bird, this is a plane, this is a whatever.
Yeah, expediting the process. Yeah,
right. And so, and that's really where kind of continuous machine learning comes in, where after a while, like right now, let's say we have a data set with, I don't know, 10,000 videos of airplanes, right? And that's just a random number. It's just off picking a random number. I don't know how many, I don't know, whatever. But let's say we get that data set of 10,000. Eventually, with a complicated enough system, you can find other data points that, like, so for example, airplanes all give off a signal telling other airplanes or air traffic controllers, hey, we're an airplane, we're in the area. Mm-hmm. That is like a 100%, it's an airplane, right? That's a definite signal that it's an airplane. So we could train our models to say, if you get that signal, whatever you're viewing is an airplane, and then train it based on that. Right? That's one way to say do kind of continuous machine learning again, where you don't need to be inputting all the time videos of airplanes. But yeah. And so it gets more and more complicated. And
right. What I think, and you stress this quite well, is that the public and those involved and those using the program are literally helping to evolve the algorithms, evolve Absolutely. SkyHub. I saw in an interview where I believe you said, this software, this device, this technology is constantly evolving. So it's not like SkyHub is just developed, built, and game over. Like it's done. This is cool because it is constantly in motion and learning and growing and helping us to figure out what the hell these phenomena are. And, I've been sent several SkyHub videos by people who have, purchased what they needed to create SkyHub and get the data out into the cloud. And some of them, dude, have been really compelling. I mean, there was one I recently saw of what we thought might have been a plane and then totally made a 90-degree turn out of nowhere and took off. So again, you're talking about kind of those observables that the Pentagon looked at. So I guess my next question for you would be, what are some of the stuff you guys have come across? I mean, yeah, of course, meteors, probably Starlink satellites are one of the big ones, but any really intriguing ones that have kind of left you guys over at SkyHub scratching your head so far?
Honestly, I think one of the coolest things about this project so far has been just how unexpected the results have been. If you thought to yourself, okay, I'll put a camera outside my house, it's pointed up at the sky, and I'm gonna measure, I'm gonna see airplanes probably. I'll see birds, I'll see airplanes, I'll see some insects, whatever. There is stuff in the sky all the time that I would never consider or think were in the sky above my house or So for example, I think maybe one of my favorite ones is one of the units is out in the United Kingdom. Just give it that. That's as close a locale as I want to give. And so the unit is there, and it's in someone's garden, and they captured somebody paragliding over like a residential neighborhood. There's someone paragliding, and if you had asked them at the beginning of this, what do you think you're going to capture? What do you think you're most likely to capture here? I don't think in a million years they would have said they would capture a paraglider. Right? Like there's just there's no way you would think, oh yeah, paraglider. There's definitely paragliding going on here. Unless you know that it's happening, you have no idea.
Right.
So that's been really one interesting one. Another really interesting one, I think, and you highlighted it here too. We've captured video of what are potentially drones. I mean, we don't know what these objects are yet that we're capturing all the time. I mean, a paraglider is easy because it's like there's a guy. You know what I mean? Like unless it's like Batman, it's a guy in a paraglider or whatever. But some of the most of the objects we capture are going to be points of light in the sky. They're going to be dots of light. And so for those ones, that's really where a good analysis of the motion of them is what's important. But we've captured some, though, that are, that it appears that the object comes very quickly in a frame. It goes down straight, then stops. Will sit there for a couple of seconds, and then takes off at another angle. It just shoots off. We've had a couple of those now. And, my best guess would be that they're drones. But even then, that's kind of interesting if they're drones. Like what's going on, right? Like who's flying a drone like that at nighttime? And kind of an interesting one. Another interesting one that we've captured, one of the units is in a fairly, I would say, remote location. And it captures a lot of military aircraft because it's near an airport base or airport base. It's near a it's near an Air Force
airfield or something.
Airfield, whatever, military base. That one's captured some really interesting ones, military planes flying low and stuff like that. But also has captured like what appears to be an object sort of breaking apart, maybe in re-entry or something. We're not really sure what it is. It looks like it might be some kind of weather balloon or something. And I know that's cliche to say to, UFO, it's a weather balloon, right? We're capturing a lot of swamp gas, Ryan. But it does, it looks like
saying Chris is the enemy of UFO Twitter.
I'm coming for you guys. It's all swamp gas. Our machine learning module just has one option: swamp gas. The object, it appears like it's tethered to something else, and the thing that it's tethered to looks like it's kind of floating or lighter. But it looks like it's kind of metallic, and it's an interesting, again, kind of an interesting video. So, I think just overall we've captured just stuff you wouldn't expect, and the number of like shooting stars, the International Space Station flybys we've captured, like, it's just, again, because we're still in very early stages for this, and that's one thing we try to make clear to anybody. People all the time will come into our chat or on our website or whatever, send us emails and say, hey, we want to give you the money to get a SkyHub. And our answer, I think, which is probably frustrating for most people, is, whoa, wait a second. Before you build a SkyHub, we need to tell you all these things. Like, we basically tell people a list of reasons why they shouldn't build one yet. We're like, it's hard to do. There's a lot of troubleshooting. We're still making the software. We haven't really settled yet on, the cameras and just because it's early stages, right? I mean, if you were designing any other engineered product, you wouldn't start selling it before it was ready.
Right.
But I think for a lot of UFO people or people that are interested in this, that's something that's a little bit out of the ordinary for the field, because usually people will start hyping things before, someone will think like, wouldn't it be great to have a machine learning method to capture UFOs? And then they will hype the hell out of it. And they're on podcasts saying, we're going to do this and all this other stuff. And like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort, and it's really hard. And so before we start doing that, we want to make sure people understand that if they are building one, if they're going to buy the parts, if they're going to help us with this, they're developing with us. They're helping us. And just like any other kind of hobby where you're trying to work with a group of people to build something, it might not work. We've had promising results, but we're not ready. We're not ready to be sold in Target or whatever. We're never going to be sold in Target. Frankly, we're not trying to sell anything, Right. So it's just a different, I guess, way of doing things and a different way of viewing this. Like we view ourselves as a open science or citizen science project. And so what that means is, just like if you were part of a bird watching group in your local community, you would be going on hikes maybe with other people and chatting with them online and sharing photos and videos and whatever. That's, it's similar to what we're doing here. We don't charge people money to be part of our Discord or to chat with us, or we don't even sell like SkyHubs, right? We don't sell anything. People now can purchase an enclosure that was designed for us by one of our our hardware designer, but that's mostly a donation to the group. We try to make it clear, like, if you're gonna come in and build these things, it's gonna be a lot of work, and it's not necessarily the easiest right now, but that's just what designing something like this takes.
Yeah. And I've seen several individuals who have taken that initiative, built the entire thing from scratch themselves, throw it on like their Humvees and drive it all out in the desert, which is so cool, man. How remote this has become, which I think, like you showing your own SkyHub there, is things have changed drastically in terms of how accessible these things can be. But because you said you're in the initial stages still, a lot of it rides on the individuals who are using it, who are creating it. And the open source data is another big thing, very positive thing, I think. We're so used to like whatever, MUFON or NASA or the government being so cagey when it comes to sharing things they've seen or experienced when it comes to unknowns. And I think that's awesome that you guys are putting that out to the public. My question would be, and I know, again, this is very, very early in the stages of what you guys are doing. Could military or government programs or, agencies, could they use the software and kind of the setup of SkyHub and privatize that data and information? Like we have the open source thing, which is awesome. Everyone can be a part of it and talk about what they think it might be. But is there a chance that your technology or what you guys have created could be used, like you said, in the military or whatnot, and we never see any of that data?
So first off, all of the SkyHub software is available to download online for free right now.
Okay.
So, if people want to, if say some group, forget the military even, if some group decided they wanted to build a private SkyHub software, right? So right now, the way that the code works is it goes to a public, it goes to a database that, again, we're still early on, so there's not data to share yet, really. I mean, we have videos and stuff, we put them on YouTube, but in terms of actual kind of data, we're working on getting that pipeline sort of moving, privatizing it in a way that it's available for the public and all those other things. Someone could, in theory, I guess, go on and change the software so that it goes to a private server instead. And, us at SkyHub have no control over that data and whatever. And so then it just goes out there. Someone could do that if they wanted to. It's part of the danger of making a open source kind of citizen science like project. Is if a company wanted to, they could do something like a SkyHub or something. But because we've done it and it's available on the internet already for free, and so the code itself that kind of builds it and underpins everything is available for free to the public. Although some small section of the data might never get to the public, the bulk of the data would. Right? I mean, it's sort of think about it like a camera, right? A camera's kind of a bad example, I guess. I guess what I'm saying is if someone wanted to buy a SkyHub and keep it not connected to the internet, they could also kind of keep that data to themselves. It wouldn't work at this point, but someone could go in and make a private SkyHub network for themselves.
Right.
But the technology is freely available to the public. So even if the military wanted to come on and take it and use it and whatever, the military would just be putting them in places that the public couldn't. But the technology can never become like,
privatized.
The technology can never just become privatized by someone.
Right. It's already out there. That's a good point. I think I understand your analogy of like, even if you threw a photo up on Facebook or whatever, like anyone can download it and then alter it or change it or use it how they want. That's what's scary about Facebook. You think that stuff, you own that? Sorry, read the fine print, guys. But that's a good point.
It's already out there. It's under a Creative Commons license. It's under an MIT kind of software license and things like that. So, people can download it and use it however they want. I mean, we're not stopping anybody from using SkyHubs, right? Like that's not our goal at all.
Yeah.
But the software is freely available on the internet. So yeah, it's a really good question. And frankly, if the military came out or if the military came to us and said, "Hey, we want to use the SkyHub software," I'd probably say no.
That would be tough. Yeah.
Kind of doesn't feel very good. You know what I mean? Like if NASA wanted to, that would be different, I think. Or if SETI wanted to utilize this or whatever. Like those are research that's for scientific research, right? The goal is for this to be done for scientific research. So I guess that's the difference there. The application of it might become privatized or whatever for some parts of people or whatever, but the software itself, the tool itself, that cat's already out of the bag.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I've got some really good listener questions in a little bit, Chris, but
Sure.
This was kind of a big question that a lot of people had, and it befuddles me why they might not be using it. But a lot of people want to know, Skinwalker Ranch, again, this big buzzword, this TV show, this mysterious place. Why aren't they using SkyHub, man? I mean, come on. They are like out there every day saying stuff is happening. They're seeing aerial objects that defy explanation. But, we're not seeing that 24/7. They're not monitoring the sky. As far as I know, I could be wrong. But has anything like Skinwalker Ranch or any other companies approached you guys about using this stuff yet? What's up, guys? Ryan Sprague here, and I'm just dropping in to remind you about our Patreon campaign. Somewhere in the Skies is always free to consume, but it's not free to create. So if you want to help the show on a monthly basis, we have tons of rewards for you in return, including shoutouts on the show and website, bonus content and episodes, and free merch. Want to be my guest or pick a topic for the show? You can do that too. So if you'd like to learn more and to help support the show, visit patreon.com/somewhereskies. Thank you, and keep looking up.
Yeah, so a lot of people have approached us. I'm not going to give any particular names or anything because I think that would,
of course,
go against sort of confidentiality and just be kind of a dick move. So I'm not going to do that.
That's fair.
What I will say though is that so a lot of the times the issues come down to there's a couple of different issues. One issue is that private data issue that comes up a lot. That is a real issue for some people and some groups and whatever, because especially let's say if you're working on maybe a project that you hope to publish a scientific study on or something like that, sometimes that data you want to keep under wraps before you publish it because you don't want somebody else to scoop you, frankly. So that's one area where there has been some discussion about, okay, well, that makes sense, and, they're not going to use it or whatever. Another one is the units currently need to have access to a power source and need to have access to the internet. And that's why, like, the Osiris project, let's say, is kind of an interesting, offshoot of a user trying to make a better version of their SkyHub, right? Our focus is on getting the software going, making sure that any bugs that are there are fixed, and making a unit that can work for our initial purposes, which was you can have it on the roof of your house, you can have it in your garden, kind of near the home. But things like, applying, getting Wi-Fi or something on there, or solar panels to power it, or other kind of power sources or whatever, all of that is kind of next stage development stuff that we haven't even really considered yet because we're trying to focus on getting this stuff done. So, sometimes there's issues of logistics, sometimes it's an issue of data handling, sometimes it's just people are busy doing other things, frankly, So, yeah, I think that's probably the best I can give on that answer, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. Yeah, again, it's you guys stressing to people who want to take part in this, like, a lot of the legwork is on you, which is awesome. You guys apply, you give the software and you collect the data, which is awesome. But yeah, something like Osiris, I can understand, like taking what SkyHub has created, building off of it, and doing your cool thing out in the desert. So God bless Mr. McGowan for doing that. I give him
it's a very cool idea. It's one that we would never have considered in 1,000 years. But yeah, so I wish him luck. It's a very cool. Yeah. It's a very cool application of it. Yeah.
It's badass for sure.
Pretty badass.
Well, speaking of videos, I want to kind of transition over to some recent stuff in the UFO, I guess, mainstream, and talk to you about these videos released by Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp. We saw these flying pyramids or pizza slices, if people have said in the recently, and we've also got an object possibly submerging into the ocean. Both Pentagon-confirmed videos. They are authentic. They are apparently still unidentified. We don't know that for sure. But in terms of video analyzing, Chris, and kind of what you guys are doing over at SkyHub with constant tracking, what do you make of these videos? And everything going on right now in the UFO world when it comes to these leaks, apparently. Are these leaks? What do you think?
I've always been cautious about making claims about any of these things too soon. I've always tried to kind of give caution, but also always tried to take a pragmatic approach to any of these sorts of releases and things. My issue with the videos, or I guess the thing that I see when I look at the videos, they're interesting. They're very interesting. The way that they've come out is interesting, and I think that the people who have pushed them out also are inevitably part of the story. It's really hard. It's really hard when you are like Corbell and Knapp have kind of, and even Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal and all of those figures have kind of inserted themselves into the stories. You know, they've built for themselves their own mythos in UFO history and lore. So I think it's really disingenuous to expect the public or other researchers or scientists or whoever to just take the videos on their merits alone when there is so much history and, you know, bad actors and everything else kind of rolled up into the history and provenance of the videos and the intelligence that comes from them. So that's one thought, right? My main thought has always been, you know, I mean, I'm sure I've said it on your show before. I've said it on many other shows before. For me, the concern has always been that any data that you get that comes from or comes through the kind of standard UFO media sources is fruit of the poison tree. You know, if somebody came to me with a clear-cut video of a UFO, I would not be the person to break the story on my podcast, right? Because it's an important piece of like evidence in history. I would bring it to the best people I could find for it. And so I think that the issue, or one of the issues, is that before this, the people you would bring it to have made it something, sometimes have made it about themselves or have become part of that story themselves. So that's issue number one. In terms of the videos themselves, the quality of the videos, they're interesting. I think actually probably the most interesting thing about them is hearing the people's, especially in the second video released, of the kind of round infrared object, or the infrared of the round kind of heat signature dropping into the ocean. That one is interesting because you can hear the people giving the kind of giving a play-by-play of what's happening to it. That is very interesting. But in terms of what we would probably categorize them as, I mean, I think it's too early to say. I think it's hard to say, but they don't really appear to have any of the. They don't behave differently enough from known objects to make them interesting. And that's kind of the problem, I think, sometimes with using a... You know, one question that people have given us that's a really good question is, well, what if the UFO is just flying like an airplane? Right?
That's a good question, yeah.
Good question, right? It's a really good question. And in that case, we're going to get a false negative, right? We're going to measure and say that it's an airplane when it isn't. It's really an unidentified or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's possible. But that's why you give other metrics as well. You don't just base it off of, you know, velocity or shape or whatever. You do other things. I think that the argument on the first one of the triangle, I think the case that it is an object not really in frame is pretty convincing to me, unfortunately.
So you're talking like a
bokeh,
sort of an apparition of the camera? Yeah. Okay.
Essentially that the object itself, is blurry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And unless Mitch Hedberg's right, and Bigfoot is blurry, and that's why all his photos look blurry, it's not really a great argument for why your video is blurry. So I think that one's kind of interesting, but I think, again, would probably be something that we would not consider to be of interest, maybe. Mm-hmm. The fact that it's a triangle shape is of interest. That would be something we would notice. And our machine would notice too, that the system would notice, hey, this is a triangle. That's different than the shape of a normal airplane or an insect or whatever. But that's also why our system ultimately the goal is to have two cameras, one for initial detection and then the other one to focus and take a clear image.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is a really cool thing. And it's like, here I am, like before I said, people come on and hype stuff before it's even developed. We haven't developed for it, but it's something we hope to develop soon. The other video of kind of the round object that appears to sort of fall slowly to the ocean surface and then dip away. Again, it's sort of if we had that video, we probably we would think it's interesting. It would be out of the realm of normal things that we'd expect. But I do suspect that, again, if that one, I think you just need more, you need more data on. Right. The argument that it's like a balloon or something, I mean, maybe that kind of could make sense. It could be a light piece of metal falling that's been heated, and that's why it's got the IR flare around it or whatever. All of those, I mean, maybe, but it's, for me at least, it starts to stretch credulity. Like the idea that a single pilot or single Navy service member or whoever, that she or he would be mistaken about seeing an object once, very quickly, and having kind of a frightened reaction and whatever, that to me doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're really talking about here. We're talking about a group of people claiming to have all seen the same thing over a prolonged period of time at regular intervals. Mm-hmm. That is not going to just be every morning everyone on the ship wakes up and puts on their bokeh glasses. That isn't going to work. And so I think that in that case, we have a much more interesting question to ask. But again, the other thing that UFO people don't seem to want to, or the people pushing this story don't want to really make note of, is that a lot of these people have made extreme claims before and been proven wrong. Bob Lazar didn't make a super mega element that let him travel through space, right? Like that, or aliens travel through space. Like that didn't happen. And so it's part of, I think, the problem ultimately of people think that people at the same time think that science is this evil thing keeping UFO world down and making fun of them and whatever, but then also think that UFO or science is this perfect bastion where a single clear photo will get rid of 100 years of fraud and con men and grifters. Science is a human endeavor. So you need to think critically, is the person who's putting this evidence forward, have they cried alien before? If they have, don't use them. They're not a good source anymore, right? Because it sounds harsh. It sounds terrible, especially considering you and I both have podcasts that talk about UFOs. But you know what I mean? Like, if you are trying to get the best evidence out there or this story out there in a way that gets it taken seriously, you either have to have taken it seriously from the beginning and kind of been consistent with your arguments and everything else and try to stay away from the comment and everything else and whatever, or you get to be a UFO media celebrity. You can't have both, in my opinion. You know, you sometimes can. Like, I think your show is a good example here of you listen to people's stories, you kind of take their views in, but you're also not really, what's the word? You're also, though, you're almost more like a commentator, right? So that's it's a different place in the kind of storyline. If you're somebody, though, who's trying to produce evidence, that requires a different play in this world.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. No, you bring up so many good points, Chris, and you do. And I mentioned this on my previous episode and I actually heard this from a fellow researcher, Nick Redfern, said when you are a UFO researcher and you're given videos, you're given documents, things like this, remember, you have to ask yourself, why me? Why did they choose me to give this and to put this out in the public? So I completely understand that that side of what you're saying. I guess kind of to piggyback off of that in terms of these videos, in retrospect, are these videos something that SkyHub can then look at and analyze in terms of the software that you've created? So can we put old UFO videos into the data processing of SkyHub and possibly get some answers from them? Like, if you could, I mean, holy shit, man, we would have 70 plus years of videos we can now look at.
It's something we've considered before. Right now, the camera, so let me show you quickly. The camera that SkyHub uses currently is a fisheye camera. So all of the metrics, all of the kind of machine learning, all of the stuff that we've built, all the software we've built has been built with a fisheye camera lens in mind. The other kind of value of SkyHub or something like a SkyHub is because the camera and the systems are all the same thing, or within the same realm of things, right? All of the data can be compared to each other. It's kind of like back in the 80s or 90s when UFO investigative groups would give out, they would give to witnesses special cameras that they use for those sorts of things, right? That couldn't be tampered with and all this other stuff. So to start with, at this point in time, no, that can't happen. However, it isn't hard to do something, or it would not be impossible to do something like that. So there are machine learning, object detection or object categorization tools that are out there right now that are available on the internet for free that people can download. I mean, it takes a little bit of Python or Golang knowledge, but if I was able to learn those things well enough to kind of work with the software people for SkyHub, anyone can. I am not good at languages, and so it's it's not super impossible actually.
Coding's not my thing either, man.
No, it's really I've never been good at it, but it's something now that I've actually I have a reason to learn, right? So it's nice. I kind of can do it more. So what I would say is, so it's something we could build. It's something we absolutely could build. It's not the current plan, or it's not the current structure that's in mind. However, it would not be impossible to build.
Yeah.
In fact, it might be easier than, it might even be easier than SkyHub, because SkyHub is using a fisheye lens versus just a normal image.
Right.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, so many variables would have to be put into play. The camera that was used for that particular video, so much to it. I completely understand that. But still, you guys have something more immediate.
Right. Still, though, it's, again, like, that is a huge part of... So right now, kind of object detection software engineering or kind of, theory or whatever, the research world is kind of broken up into two major categories, I guess. One would be static object or static detector or static camera. And the other would be like a motion or a moving camera, like a drone or something, right? A camera on a drone. The camera on the drone system has more study done with it, frankly, because I think it's more of interest, a hotter topic. But that is actually probably closer to what we would have to do for something like what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a really good question, though.
So, Chris, I want to move to some listener questions that people were really excited to submit. I know some of these people are directly involved with SkyHub, either have the software, have been messing around with it, or they're really curious about your thoughts on some of this other stuff. So I'm going to start with Aaron on Twitter. Aaron asks, what do you expect SkyHub to look like in 10 years? We kind of touched on this, what the future of SkyHub is, but yeah, man, 10 years from now, I don't even want to know where humanity is going to be at, let alone SkyHub. But yeah, what do you think?
I was going to say, let's hope that we're all still, civilization is still standing.
Yeah.
No, also Aaron has been a hugely important new member of the team. Actually, his camera is like in the best possible place. It's so interesting. Like anytime we capture something interesting, there's like a 75% chance it's from Aaron. At this point in time, it's ridiculous.
Dude, he sent me some of the videos. And man, those things, I don't even know how you can begin to describe some of the things he's captured so far. But that's what you guys are for.
Yeah, I know. He's capturing some really cool things, which is amazing. So in 10 years, what I would really love to see is our initial system completed. So, and in a stable state. So not really, updates occasionally, but, no major updates to the platform. So, what I mean by that would be, units that are able to do that kind of minimum set point analysis. So, they have a camera attached, they have sensors attached, they are able to detect objects, categorize them successfully, and there is a pipeline where the public, even if you don't own a SkyHub, can go and view the videos that are coming out of SkyHub. And pull the data if you want to do data analysis as well, if that's of interest for you. So that would be, if we could reach that goal, and it's not really, that's not even as long-term as 10 years, but if we could hit that goal, that would really be, I would feel like we've done exactly what we've set out to do. In terms of further stuff, what I would love to see would be, I would love to see SkyHubs used for other purposes besides just, detecting airplanes or, those sorts of things. I would love to see a SkyHub. I would love to see groups develop SkyHub for, astronomy, for measuring, attaching. There's very cheap telescope systems that can be added to things like Raspberry Pi, say, for example, today. SkyHub uses the Jetson platform, which is a microcomputer like a Raspberry Pi, but from NVIDIA. Development of something like that on top of SkyHub, I think, would be really fascinating and interesting and add another layer of what it can do. I would also love to really see, the units themselves get cheaper and the software get more robust to the point where for you to purchase the stuff you need to make a SkyHub work, you're spending $100, $200. That really, in 10 years, I think that's absolutely doable. Right now, a SkyHub can cost, depending on what you want to put in it and everything else, around $1,000, $1,000 to $2,000, depending on the cameras you want and how many other sensors you want to add and all that other stuff. But I think as we develop, every month that we develop, it gets a little bit cheaper. But the hardware really is the area where the cost comes in, and those are hardware pieces that we have no control over. Right? We're not building, we're not building our own cameras or something. So
right.
10 years, that's what I want to see. So I want to see a SkyHub that's fully functional, that only costs you $100.
I love that, man. Again, it's sort of democratizing the entire experience, you know? I mean, the more people who can afford to do SkyHub, the more data we're going to get, the more we're going to understand what we're dealing with, and everyone wins. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point. And also using the software and technology you guys are creating for other purposes. You know, I wrote this huge, scary article over at the Debrief about satellites and how there are satellites right now that can literally zoom into your bedroom and can actually pierce through solid walls to capture images. And that sounds absolutely terrifying. And the breadth and scope of these satellites seems very, like privacy breaking. Mm-hmm. But we have to keep in mind, too, some of these satellites that are monitoring the Earth 24/7 are being used for really good purposes, such as natural disasters, and being able to get that information out to the public sooner, be like, yo, this fire's coming your way, get out of there, or to better prepare for things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's great that, again, SkyHub is not just for looking for UFOs or, there's a reason it's called SkyHub and not UFO Hub or something like that, right?
Right, yeah. I think actually you do bring up a good point, and it's actually something I should have probably, maybe it'll end up in a listener question, but the privacy issues, we take those extremely seriously, and it's such an important thing. I mean, we're, if someone came to me and said, hey, I'm a UFO researcher, let me put this 24-hour camera on your house, I would tell them to go to hell. They would not get past my lawn. The camera is built to only measure when it detects an object. That's number one. Number two, one of the things that we are detecting for at the early stages here are things that we want to tell the camera, don't measure this, right? Mm. So, for example, if my unit for the winter, because my enclosure isn't very good or wasn't very good for a long time, was sitting here in my office. And the most common object my SkyHub unit detected were my cats, right? So that kind of thing, we would tell it, hey, throw this out, right? Or if it sees a person, throw it out. Or, automatic masking of buildings or surrounding areas to retain privacy. So all of that are things that we're taking very seriously. And again, if you're interested in those kinds of, if you're interested in any of this, but join our Discord and ask us to be part of the team, because we are again an open project, so anyone can join. And so long as you have the time and the desire to, we're happy to have your help.
Cool, man. Yeah, and we'll definitely put those links in for people at the end here. Let's move on to this listener question. One on Facebook, longtime listener of the show. So shout out to One. Thank you for all your support. Yep. He's awesome, man. He's scientist. The bald scientist, exactly. He's got a curveball for you here. I like this one. The Tic Tac type of UFOs. I'm partial to the nuts and bolts model to explain them, but what gives me pause are two main properties of them. Their apparent lack of interaction with the environment, lack of sonic booms and hypersonic speeds, he says, and even more weirdly, their uncanny ability to stop on a dime. Inertia be damned. You can tell he's a scientist. Do you know of any material that even theoretically could be manipulated to express both these properties of the Tic Tac?
It's a really good question. The reason I think I know One well enough to say that one of the reasons he's probably asking the question on inertia is, if you guys have ever seen the movie Spaceballs, there's the part where when they come out of ludicrous speed or whatever, they stop, and then Lord, Helmet or whatever, Darth Helmet goes flying, right? He kind of wakes up. What's going on?
Love it.
anyone that's been on a bus that is stopped suddenly, or even in a car that stopped suddenly, and been jolted forward, will know what the problem here is for something like a Tic Tac object where it is going very, very quickly, then stops. Inertia would suggest that all of the occupants of the Tic Tac are jelly after they hit the side of the wall, right? So they experience G-forces and the forces of the wall, all those other things. In terms of we have things that can lessen the effect of G-force, but not materials. But like you can imagine, for example, like I just gave a stupid so actually a lot of high schools will do this experiment with their engineering students where you build a protection device for an egg that goes into a water rocket, right?
Oh yeah, that's cool. I've heard of that.
In this scenario, we're the egg, right? And we don't want to become goo. So one thing that we could do, for example, inside an object like that or a Tic Tac or whatever is, and I'm not a civil or an aerospace engineer, but one could imagine, for example, an internal cavity that actually is also always in motion. So you have kind of like imagine you're on an airplane, but you're sitting on a bike. And so the airplane stops suddenly, but you're on the bike, and the bike has its own separate stopping mechanism of your inertia. You would still stop, so the airplane stops and you keep moving, but because you have your own braking mechanism internally to the airplane, you can stop at a good enough speed that you are not impacted by, or you're impacted less than, by the G-force or whatever. That is one potential kind of idea that you could do, right? So there's ways that you can kind of design maybe around that, but again, we're talking like this. These are there's an aerospace engineer someplace listening to this that's being like, these are the ramblings of a lunatic mind. You know what I mean? So there's like stuff you can do. I mean, we do some stuff like that too with you can think like with ballistic vests or stuff like that, right? Those are all designed to lessen the impact of a ballistic impact on a person or on an object or whatever. Similar sorts of technologies could be applied to things like an a spaceship or whatever. In terms of the ability to kind of to seemingly not be affected by shear or the kind of wind drag or stress or things like that come from being in an atmosphere, there are surface coatings that can allow you to significantly lessen drag. There's also ones that can greatly decrease the heat generated or things like that, and also ways that you can, besides just not feeling the effect, there are also again ways that you can kind of mitigate the force of those things. So for example, there are nanomaterials that are structured in such a way that heat transfer is limited to a maximum value because the material is so small in some direction that the quanta of heat energy, the phonon, literally cannot transport through the material. That would be another thing that potentially you could think about, something like that maybe could happen. But, again, I think that, so there are possibilities there for things that could maybe be happening. And sometimes I think the answer is less exotic than we think it is. If you painted, painting an object white versus painting it black will change the amount of thermal radiation it gets from sunlight by a huge factor, right? That's a
Yeah.
simple change you can do. So there might be other simple changes we can do that we just don't know of yet, because we just haven't had to face that problem with engineering.
Such a good point. Yeah, we are cursed by our own limitations at times, but yeah, that's a good point. Well, One, he just leaves this comment too, and I'd love to read this, even though it's not a question. He puts it really well. Personally, I hope these things are from other countries and not from out there. You see, if they are from here, at least we have a decent chance of replicating such technology, like you said, and even developing defenses against them, because there is no significant difference in the technological capabilities between countries. On the other hand, true alien tech is bound to be thousands, perhaps millions of years ahead of ours. In that case, there will be nothing we can do if they decide that they are done with us, which I wouldn't blame them at this point, Chris, would you?
Oh, no, we are. Yeah, no.
A lot of self-reflection.
Yeah, that's boy. I think One is totally right though. If this is another country doing this, I was watching yesterday actually a documentary or a series of documentaries, I guess, on World War II, and they got up to the point where they were talking about the V1 and V2 rockets, and just thinking about how big of a at the beginning of World War II, people were going into battle still on horseback. And by the end of it, we were having tank only battles. Technology has changed a tremendous amount just in our lifetime. To think that a chat like this, even talking via video in real time with crystal clear picture. When I was a teenager, in the year 2000, the year 2010, would have been nigh unthinkable.
Yeah.
It would have been something that we would have in 2010, I think we would have been like, yeah, okay, that's probably on the horizon. But when I was a kid, the first computer we owned was an IBM PC Junior. He used DOS. You know what I mean? Our technology has progressed a huge amount. It probably has far outpaced our ability as a species to handle it, really. And so to think that another country who maybe was focusing more on surveillance or stealth or drone building or whatever couldn't have gotten a decade or two ahead of us, I don't think that's that ridiculous to think. And that's the other part of it too. The other answer to One's question from before, what happens to the inertia or whatever? What if there's no organisms inside the object?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? What if it's just a robot? What if the Tic Tac is just a drone? Then we're no longer talking about an organic, being affected by inertia. We're talking about a machine, and the machine.
And it's common sense, man. Yeah,
absolutely. That's how we do it.
We don't send men to the moon first. We send out, probes and whatnot to check it out. So that makes total sense.
We let our billionaires send people to other planets.
Yeah, exactly. Or our monkeys. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, the idea that this could be from another country, I don't think is really, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, it isn't. And, the concern with that being when you have people like Christopher Mellon or Luis Elizondo or anyone for that matter saying, could it be Russia or China? Possibly. We don't think it is. That's troublesome. I talked to Micah Hanks about this recently. If it is Russia or China, then those are acts of war coming into a training space for the Navy during a training exercise. Dude, come on. How much more of an act of war do you need? So if it is Russia or China, shouldn't we be seeing, the Top Gun scenarios coming out and Maverick shooting those things out of the sky? And we're not. We're seeing them disappear out of the atmosphere, supposedly.
that's the other part of it that I think is so fascinating as well is so I guess two thoughts on that, right? The first one would be, you're absolutely right. If this is as serious a national security concern as, well, I think it's, our world is so different and so much more diplomatically oriented than we were, pre the United Nations. Like we have evidence of like atrocities being committed in North Korea. Let's take an example of a country that we don't even have trading or real diplomacy with, right? Like we know that the North Korea is a terrible country where a dictator reigns supreme and is doing these terrible things and everything else. And yet our military and our leaders can't act on that because of all these other socio-political concerns and things that we have to consider, these other considerations. So the idea that we wouldn't, to me, then the argument that if we saw something like this in the sky and we wouldn't go after it immediately, I don't know, that kind of makes logical sense to me. But at the same time, it is frustrating because you'd think, again, if we don't know what they are, we'd want to find out.
Yeah, exactly. And we're, like you said, we're seeing that reflected even right now in Israel and everything. There are certain actions you can take and some you can't due to, like you said, so many socio-political issues and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah, even if it was Chinese or Russian, would we immediately say, okay, let's go to war, let's do this, like this is the reason? Or a lot of people think right now that all the mainstream coverage having to do with the military and the potential threat these objects could cause, is this leading up to something? Are we trying to boost the military funding yet again with all these possible threats in our skies and our national security being threatened?
I mean, maybe. The thing is that too, like, I don't think we really need UFOs to make the case right now that, say, Russia is an adversarial bad actor who doesn't want what's best for the United States, right? Like, that's the other part of this, too, that I think is so funny is people on Twitter or wherever talking about UFOs will often act like this is the only thing going on in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not. It is a very small part of things that overall, I think, even like, say, Marco Rubio's involvement, from my kind of cynical viewpoint, is a very convenient story to get him out of the news, right? So, I think, the other thought, I guess I had based on what you were saying was, so imagine pre-World War II, the V2 rocket is out there. And who reports on the V2 rocket being real is the same person who reported on, a year before had done a report on fairies in Wyoming, right? Like fairy folk and gnomes in Wyoming, claiming that they were traveling around in ships and whatever.
Yeah.
And then these rockets come out. They're like, actually, no, it's a military thing. The problem, again, with the message, the problem is not necessarily the message. It becomes the messenger in their history. And it's something that I don't think people in the UFO space have really grappled, or UFO fans, I guess, haven't really grappled with. I remember when the first report about this, the task force or whatever came out, and everyone was, people were like on Twitter, all excited and everything else. And you had some of the older UFO people who'd been involved in this before and seen disclosure come and gone 100 times and whatever. And they were all saying, hey, this has happened before. And what happened last time was, Linda Moulton Howe's documentary on cattle mutilations got some normal media attention, and then people started looking into the backgrounds of the players and the actual story and everything else, and it all fell apart. Right? They don't seem to realize that, like, if it is an important story, if it is a real national security threat, if it's a real national security issue that they're working on, why publish a book like Hunt for the Skinwalker? Why do a Bob Lazar documentary? Like, is it serious or is it not serious?
Yeah,
it's one or the other, and so you can't have it be, it's just entertainment. So we're just put, that was the thing with TTSA that always really kind of frustrated me was, on the one hand, you had them coming out saying, no, this is really serious stuff. These are national security issues, everything else. And then you'd ask them, well, why are you publishing a Bob Lazar biography? And they say, well, that's our media arm.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a really good point. Yeah.
I don't know. There's a reason that there's a reason Northrop Grumman doesn't have a media arm that publishes stories on, flying rockets or whatever. There's a reason that Raytheon doesn't have a superhero as their logo who's got comic books and movies, and, because it's serious. It's a serious thing. People die. So it's so frustrating to, it's the same thing with some of the figures too, where you have to say to yourself, you have to wonder again, like Greer recently pushes out this thing saying that Elizondo is what did he say on his YouTube thing? Elizondo is
disinformation agent,
and
false flag alien invasion pending. Yeah.
It's like, okay, well then if it's serious, at least Greer I think at least has taken himself too seriously his entire career in UFOs. But again, it's this sort of thing of, is it serious or not? It has to be one or the other. I think for a lot of people, the argument of, they're just doing that because it's just good TV or because it's just media exposure or whatever. Media exposure is not the kind of currency of the realm that people seem to think it is for national security issues. It's very strange. There's a reason spies don't go on the History Channel. There's a reason that doesn't happen.
It's a little contradictory. Such a good point, man. All right. Well, let's move back to SkyHub for just a moment. Our last SkyHub question of the day. David on Twitter asks, let's see here. What skills or knowledge are you in most need of to help move SkyHub forward?
Really good question. So we currently would love developers with skills in Golang, in Python, in C, in Java, any of the kind of, any of the languages that we write the code in currently. It would also be really great or really useful to have people involved to help us kind of take the machine learning and user interface side of things to the next level. So people with experience in database management or building would also be very, very welcome. And also, just people interested and ready to be actively engaged in this. This is a project where people are working for free. We're spending our free time to build this because it's a labor of love. That isn't everybody's cup of tea, but if you think that it's something that you'd like to be involved in and it sounds something that you think it would be a good way to spend a part of your weekends, please reach out to us. team@skyhub.org is the email. So shoot us an email. We'd love to have you.
Cool, man. And again, I think it's important to stress that all of you at SkyHub are dedicating your time, your insight, even your own money to making this happen. And I know you guys have a Patreon as well. And a couple of people were wondering, what is the Patreon for? How can they support you guys? And where does the money go for the Patreon campaign?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So all of the Patreon money goes towards development costs. So we actually we just put in a order for some SkyHub enclosures. So what those are they are kind of a thermoformed 3D print, or not 3D printed, thermoformed cases where people can build and put their SkyHubs and have an official enclosure, right? A big chunk of the money goes towards paying, frankly, for server cost. So paying for someplace to put the data.
Yeah, man. It's not cheap, I know.
No, that, the website, all of those other kinds of aspects and things. And then ultimately the goal would be to have the ability to get professionals working on SkyHub part-time, right? So paying people, for 3 hours, 4 hours of specialty programming work or whatever, where our team can't, where our team maybe doesn't have the expertise or the ability to handle a specific aspect or a specific thing like that. So, it's a great question though. And another thing that we are, another thing where we are currently figuring out, this is, for a lot of us, the first time that we have, for some of us, it's not the first time that they've worked on kind of a charity or something like this. For me, it really is the first time that I've kind of worked at this high level of a charity or a kind of an organization, not charity, a non-for-profit kind of endeavor or project, a citizen science project. Being transparent with the money is also an extremely important aspect of that. And so that's another thing that we are, if we had all the time in the world, all of this stuff would be done already. We don't. It is a public project, but that's definitely something else that we hope the public will keep us accountable on and keep us moving forward with, right? But right now, though, like I said, the money is going towards the building and developing of the enclosures for environmental conditions more extreme, let's say, than my garden. The development of or the kind of cloud computing costs and things like that we have, and the storage costs.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, I think that's really important to sort of demystify the whole contribution thing. A lot of people want to know, well, you're not using this money to go on a vacation, are you, Chris? So it's good to know what is actually being done. And I highly suggest everyone check out your Patreon campaign over there. It's very, very important for something like this for the public.
Yeah, definitely check it out. I mean, that's the other thing too. We've toyed with the idea in the past of trying other. The good news right now is that our need for money, we break even right now. You know what I mean? Our need for money doesn't overcome the amount of money we have every month coming in, which is great, which is perfect. It's exactly where you want to be. But as more of these units come online, as we want to do bigger things or bigger projects with this or stuff like that, it's gonna, that's what the Patreon really is for, to kind of build that base up and make sure that we're ready to operate in the coming years, so that there is a SkyHub in 10 years.
Exactly, man. Come out swinging. I gotcha. Well, moving to the podcast, my man, before we go here, tell us about the Mad Scientist podcast. Maybe some of your favorite episodes you guys have recently done. I know you did a huge multi-part series on time travel, which is so cool. A topic everyone can relate to and find interesting. But you guys break it down, which I love. So yeah, what do you got going on over at the Mad Scientist podcast as of late and in the future?
Yeah, so the show that we do is the Mad Scientist podcast. It's me and my co-host Marie. And so our show really looks at kind of the history, philosophy, and hard science behind topics that usually come up in science fiction or on, just science fiction kind of topics and things like that, but also looking at parts of the science world or science history that maybe you weren't taught in school but are still really interesting. So My favorite series probably are, we did one on the history of surgery, which was fascinating and terrifying and just really, really fun to research for. We did one on Robert Bigelow and kind of the beginnings and early time period of the Skinwalker Ranch saga and how it played into To the Stars Academy and how it really got us to today. And we did a series recently, like Ryan said, on time travel, which was a lot of fun. And we kind of go into, what is time as kind of a physical concept? What does it mean mathematically? How do we use it in our mathematics? All of those kind of big questions, ultimately getting to, okay, well, what does this mean for time travel? And what does it mean for our ability to go back or forward in time? So it's been a lot of fun. Check it out. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. We're available now on Pandora too, which, we're just available everywhere. So go find us and take a listen.
Yep, absolutely. Anywhere you find Somewhere in the Skies, Mad Scientist podcast is there as well.
Absolutely.
Well, closing question as always, my man. You know this role by now. Where can we find everything you're up to, and where can we find SkyHub to learn more?
Yeah, so you can find SkyHub at skyhub.org. That's where you'll find the link to our Discord server, so you can come in and ask us questions. That's where you'll find our Git repository, so where you can actually go and download the code and see the inner workings and everything else. You can find us on Twitter, so at SkyHub10 is the main SkyHub page, but there's also, obviously, you can follow me at Mad Scientist Pod. Follow other folks from the team on Twitter as well. Our Twitter handles are up under the team kind of heading on the SkyHub website. Our next kind of big appearance is going to be at the SU conference here coming up. We have a video presentation on kind of what SkyHub is, how it's evolved, the software and the hardware and all those sorts of things. That'll be going up on YouTube after the conference, so people can go see it. And yeah, that's really the best place for people to find us. So I'm on Twitter all the time, probably too much. So you can always find me on Twitter yelling about something. So
we all are, man. We all are. I'm glad you brought up SCU. I know you guys are working with them and also with the UAP expedition group who's going out to the Catalina Islands to monitor the activity out there where the Tic Tac event took place. So that's really exciting. I highly suggest the YouTube channel where you can watch some of the videos that SkyHub devices have captured, which is really cool. The comments are great, hearing everyone say what they think it is and everything in between. So no, man, you guys got a good thing going on. I am so happy to be in this generation that is taking UAP seriously, is trying to put more science into all of this and trying to understand these phenomena that continue to mystify us, brother. So thank you for coming on Somewhere in the Skies. And thank you for being a part of SkyHub. I think this is the future of UAP studies, bar none.
As always, man, thanks for having us. Always a pleasure. And we can't wait to have some really good videos here that we can keep sharing with you. So we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.